In this video, I'm going to show you my recipe for painting Death Guard green. Hi everyone, and welcome to another brushstroke painting guide. So as you heard from the intro there, this time we're looking at a recipe for painting Death Guard armour. Now, I've started doing a full video on painting Death Guard, but I've had a lot of questions about specifically how I did the weathering on this particular backpack. So I thought I'd do a very quick recipe video on how I painted the green armour to get you guys started while you're waiting for that full video to drop. Now before we begin, I think there's a few things I should mention which will help you get the most out of this video, starting off with thinning your paints. So this recipe relies quite heavily on getting that nice clean smooth finish. So if you'd like to know more about how I thin my paints and how thin is thin, then you might want to check out the paint thinning video I did by clicking the link above. I also get asked a lot about the paintbrushes I use. Now, thanks to the awesome guys at Artis Opus, I now actually have a paintbrush set, which has brushes in it which are specifically picked to match the brushes that I use in all of my paint guides. So if you'd like more details on that, then please do click this link above. And then finally, this video recipe does rely heavily on some edge highlighting. So if you'd like some tips and tricks on how to improve your edge highlighting, then please do click that link above or check out all the links in the description below. Okay then, so let's dive in and start some painting. And as you can see, I've already primed my model piece. In this particular case, it's a Plague Marine backpack, but it could be any Death Guard model that you like. Now for this example, I've actually done a zenithal prime of light grey over black, but that's not necessary for this recipe. You could either use just a plain grey or a plain black and still get the same results, because we're going to do a solid base coat to start with. And that solid base coat is going to be using some Death Guard green from Games Workshop. Really simple step to start off with then. I've thinned the paint down on my palette so it's flowing really cleanly and smoothly, and I'm going to apply several coats in order to get to a solid finish. Now the aim here is to get that smooth finish, so do take your time. Make sure you apply the coat evenly across the whole of the surface and work it into all of those details and recesses. You don't need to be careful of other details because you'll paint those in afterwards, so you can use a bigger brush and you can get this job done nice and quick. As you can see, this first coat is a little patchy in areas, but that's absolutely fine. Just concentrate on getting it on evenly and smoothly, and then we can come back in and apply a second coat to build up to a solid finish. And this second coat is exactly the same as you've just done with the first. The aim is to get a nice clean, even coat across all of the surface. Keep that paint nice and thin and make sure you work it into all those details and recesses, which when you're done should look something like this. Now this is the stage where you'd paint in the rest of your base coats, so I'll do that now. And that means we can move on to the next stage of painting the green armour, and that's going to be applying an all-over wash with some Agrax Earthshade from Games Workshop. So another nice and simple step to follow on with then, I'm applying this neat straight from the pot, and I'm sticking with my big brush so I can get this done nice and quick. But that's not to say that you can just throw the wash on and basically flood the model. Do apply it methodically and work your way around the model and work it into all those recesses. On flatter areas, try and encourage it away from the centre and into the edges to try and avoid any ugly watermarks. But if they do happen when it's dry, then don't worry, because we'll be tidying things up in the next step anyway. And the only other thing to remember when using a wash is that it will take a little bit longer to dry, so do make sure it is fully dry before moving on to the next stage. And with that wash now fully dry, you should have something that looks a little bit like this. Now, as I mentioned in the previous stage, now's a good time to neaten up any areas which you're not happy with. Maybe the wash has settled in the wrong place or whatever. So I'm going to come back in now with some Death Guard green and just neaten a few things up that are bothering me. So as I say, this step is completely optional. It's just an opportunity to neaten up any areas where that wash might have settled where you didn't want it, or you got a watermark or something like that. So what I've done is I've thinned down the Death Guard green paint so it's behaving a little bit more like a wash really, or a glaze, and I'm just skimming over the areas which I want to fade out where that wash has been settling. I've stepped down to a smaller brush, so I've got a little bit more control and I'm applying the paint quite precisely. Depending on how strong that Agrax has settled, you might find that you need to apply a couple of very thin coats just to dull it out. But just work your way around and pick out any areas which you're not happy with and neaten everything back up, basically. Okay, so I'm a lot happier now that my shadows and shading is where I want it to be, and now I'm going to move on to my first step of weathering to the armour, and for this I'm going to use some Wyldwood Contrast paint thinned down with some contrast medium from Games Workshop. So what I've done is I've heavily diluted the wild wood. It's about 5 parts contrast medium to 1 part wild wood, and that gives it a nice translucent and greasy looking effect. And I'm looking to apply it into the creases and the recesses under the armor panels, and then with a little flick, very lightly touching the armor, you can make sort of greasy streaks, and you can sort of just build it up under the armor plates and then flick down with your brush very lightly, barely touching the surface, just to give that sort of greasy, grimy kind of dripping look. And then it's a case of just sort of slowly work your way around the model. Because it's so thin and such a light layer that you're applying, it will dry really quickly, which means that you can build up this effect over time as you move around the model and sort of add more layers and interest to it. Go slow and less is more, so don't get too carried away and apply it too quickly, and then just work your way around the model and build up that kind of greasy, grimy effect to a point that you're happy with. And when you are happy, you should have something that looks a little bit like this, which means we're now ready to move on to the second stage of weathering the armour, and that's going to be applying some small patches of a rusty brown colour, and for this I'm going to use some Doombull Brown from Games Workshop. Much like the last step, I've thinned this with a lot of water so that it's now behaving more like a wash. I'm going to apply it around the model to add that little bit of variation and interest, break up the green of the armour. So just apply it to areas like round the rivets and in the cracks and things, just to sort of give that idea of build-up of grime or maybe even rust. Pick out areas which you think look quite dull or could use a bit of a lift. Don't go too mad, because obviously you don't want to turn this into what looks more like a camouflage kind of effect. So less is more, but just use it just to break up that green. Okay, so that's looking suitably dirty and grimy, which brings us on to the final step now for the armour, and that's adding an edge highlight. And for this I'm going to use some Ogryn camo from Games Workshop. And the aim of this step is you want to go around all of the model, picking out the sharp edges to give it that extra definition and highlight. So depending on the model you're painting, this could actually be a very time-consuming step, but it is worth doing well and it is worth doing neatly, so do take your time and pick out all of those edges. As always, if you make any mistakes, don't panic. You can always go back later and tidy things up, so just let it dry and then move on. And when you finish this stage, you can just go back in with some thinned down Death Guard green and just neaten everything back up again. So like I say, it's just a case of slowly working your way around all of the model and picking out all of those edges. And after a while, I actually find it gets quite relaxing. You sort of get into a bit of a rhythm and you can hit those edges with that sweet part of the brush just on the tip. But like I said at the start of this video, if you do want some hints and tips in terms of how I improved my edge highlighting, then please do check out this video above, because I think it will help you a lot. Okay then, so with those final edge highlights now done to all of the green armour, that means that the green armour is now complete. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you found it useful. If you have, then please do hit that like button and drop a comment below. If you'd like to see more of these recipe videos, then please let me know in the comments below what you'd like to see. Also, don't forget to check out the description below, where I'm going to list all of the paints that I've used for this recipe and where you can get those at discount prices, so it's definitely worth checking out. And you'll also find all the links to the videos I mentioned earlier too. If you have enjoyed this video, then please do hit that subscribe button and don't forget to click the notification bell to be told whenever I post another video. Speaking of other videos, I'd love it if you stayed on the channel, so why not stay and check out another recipe video, or perhaps one of my other painting videos where you can see these recipes in action.